about 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna get started. If other people come in, we'll let them join us. But thanks for being here on time today and braving the weather. I thought for sure I was gonna be talking to just a trickle of people because of that, so I appreciate you especially being here. My name is Jess Lex. I am a realtor in the Dane County area, and my specialty is in helping longtime homeowners downsize their homes. And one of the things that I do to help people with that process is teach this seminar called Downsize with Ease. I really love presenting this topic, so hopefully it will be informative as well as fun for everybody today. Just a little bit about myself. I live in Deerfield. I have an 18-acre hobby farm. My spare time is filled with, family time, and I like to play music as well. And a little bit more about me to give me a little bit of street cred. I am younger than I look. If you look closely, probably at least an eighth of my head is filled with gray hair at this point. I have adult children, so I know some stuff, maybe more than I look like I know. So I just like to put that out there because some people probably listen to me and look at me and they're like, I don't know why you're standing up here. You don't know anything about life. So I just wanted to make sure to pass that along so that everything I say isn't in one ear and out the other. Are the two of you together back there? Yeah? Okay, perfect. So I passed out a folder to everybody. I think everyone has one if you don't raise your hand. And I just wanted to go over what's in that folder before we get started so you know what you're working with here. There are 3 items. The most important one on the left side is the PowerPoint for today. So that's going to be pretty much everything that's up here. You're welcome to write notes on that if that's helpful for you, or just to use it as a reference when you go home as you're reviewing what we talked about. There is also a seminar feedback survey. I'm not going to force you to do homework, but if you want to give any feedback after the seminar or ask for any of the additional resources that I have available or might mention throughout, feel free to fill that out and just bring it up to me or leave it on your chair when you go. And then the last thing is my Home Simplified guide that just talks a little bit more about downsizing a home. And not everybody is probably here because they want to make a move. I don't spend the majority of the time talking about that, but because I am a realtor, sometimes that comes into the conversation as well. So we'll probably spend the majority of the time talking about decluttering, which I find most people come to this seminar to hear about. So, yes.
How far ahead do you think we should plan?
That's a great question. Most people, when they start thinking about this process, they're not exactly sure when, that end date for downsizing is, whether when they're going to move or, when they're not going to feel up to the challenge anymore. So I just tell people to start as early as possible, because it can take people 1 year to 10 years to do it. And the last thing you want to do is have to be rushed in the process. So that's a great question. All right, so I'm going to jump right in, and we are going to start with the first slide. What is downsizing? Anybody want to shout out what they think of when they hear the word downsizing?
Getting rid of my treasures.
Perfect. I like how you call them treasures. That's great. Getting rid of treasures. Awesome.
Moving from a large space to a smaller space.
Great. Moving from a large space to a smaller space. Perfect.
Getting rid of junk.
Junk. Okay. Yes. Some of it is treasure and some of it is actually junk. No offense, right?
Right.
Yes. Anything else?
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you braving the weather. Okay, so downsizing can mean, the space getting smaller, right? Or it can mean the configuration of your space changing. I hear a lot of people who maybe don't want a smaller space, but they want to not have to climb stairs anymore or do laundry in the basement. So it could just be configuring that space differently. And a lot of people use the word right sizing in that sort of situation. Pretty similar concept, right? But it doesn't denote smaller. It could be clutter care, that decluttering, that getting rid of treasures and trash. Simplifying your life. Maybe you don't feel like spending as much time cleaning, doing yard maintenance, weeding your gardens, right? Some people want to downsize their monthly bills as well, and that's why they consider downsizing. So lots of different reasons why somebody might be in this room to talk about this topic. And we are going to go through the process sort of in this order. Everybody's situation is different, so again, there may be stuff that's not relevant to you at all, but hopefully you'll find at least enough nuggets for you to take the time to be here. So the first part of the process could start with working through emotions. And this slide right here is just the outline of how we're going to talk about things today, so I'm just going to high-level overview and then we'll dive into each one. Then you might be thinking about decluttering, and there's two ways that you can do this. DIY or do it yourself, or you may want to hire a professional service to help you out. There could also be components of relationship management, okay? I think you all win the prize today for those who came with a significant other, so kudos for those of you who are on the same page and being here today. And then you might also be moving, right? So that's why I have a question mark, because not everybody's thinking about that or not thinking about it right away. So let's start with working through emotions. Some of the feelings that you might be feeling when you're thinking about downsizing and decluttering would be overwhelm. Where do I start? How do I take all of this stuff and make it less, right? So that is one of the big ones that I hear. The other one is nostalgia, memories, sentimental value to things, right? How do you deal with those feelings? You might also be fearing change, or maybe you're just plain excited. You know, downsizing could mean transitioning to a new phase of life, and maybe you're ready to kind of change things up, right? So they don't always have to be negative emotions. I would say a lot of people have more of those negative feelings, but you can have positive ones with this process as well. And it's okay to have both. So the most important thing with working through emotions is just going to be to allow yourself to face them and acknowledge that they're real, right? But there are a lot of things that we can do to lessen the emotions, like making a plan, talking to somebody. Maybe you find a buddy in this room today who you're like, okay, we're both here today, we're thinking about downsizing and decluttering. Let's, put a monthly check-in call on the calendar with one another and just talk about how we're feeling, talk about how it's going. So don't let yourself be alone in those, but also don't be afraid of them. You're going to feel them, that's normal, and you will be able to get through it. So, now that you've thought about some of those emotions you might have, how do we get started with our DIY decluttering if you're kind of a do-it-yourselfer? The first place you want to start with is mindset, okay? So, just like the question that was asked just a few minutes ago, this will be a process, and please don't expect it to be a week-long process, a month-long process. It may be a years-long process, and that's normal and okay. You will also get better at it as you go along. I've been teaching this seminar for about 3 years now in various places, and I always tell people after 3 years of teaching about downsizing, I have a really hard time shopping and buying new stuff.
Oh, boy.
But I also have a really much easier time just getting rid of things. Because I am a very sentimental person, and I've always been not like a ridiculous saver, but I'm the person who has 10 years worth of greeting cards from birthdays in a closet because I can't seem to part with them, So I understand all of that, but I can tell you the more you think about it and do it, the easier it gets. And the last one, you may need to sort through things more than once, right? Maybe this first year you go through every section of your house and you make some progress, but there's still going to be some of those things where you're like, should probably get rid of that, but I'm not ready, that's fine. Just leave it. Maybe next year, you'll start the process over and do one more round, and a couple more of those things will find their way to new homes. And then maybe year 3, a couple more of those things will find their way to new homes. So, don't worry if you can't make all the decisions right away. Okay, the next part, like I mentioned when we're talking about our feelings, making a plan is huge for being able to get through this process. So the first thing I want to help us break down a little bit is that feeling of overwhelm. Where in the world do I start with this process? So there's 2 things that I think are really important. The first thing is figuring out the area you want to work with, and the second thing is figuring out the time frame that you want to work with. And both of those you want to start really small with. So, if you are thinking about your entire house and you have no idea where you want to start, I would suggest starting as small as a closet, and probably even smaller than that, a shelf in a closet. Okay? I know that sounds simplistic and basic, but the last thing you want to do is pick that area, empty the whole thing out, put it in your hallway, and then that's all you've got the energy for that day. And now you just have a pile of stuff for the next 2 weeks in your hallway because you started wrong and you still feel overwhelmed and you demotivated yourself. So, I suggest picking a shelf in a closet, and if you haven't done any downsizing yet, I would start with your linen closet as the entry point for getting practice in downsizing. Does anyone have any idea why the linen closet is a great place to start?
Because you basically only use one thing out of it.
Sure, because you're not using a lot of things out of it. That's great. How about for you?
You're not too attached to it?
Sure. Yeah, that I think is the big one. The things in most of our linen closets are not our most prized possessions. They're not the things that bring us to tears when we think about them. There might be a few things in there, like let's say your grandkids came to visit and every time they used the same set of Mickey Mouse sheets on the bed and you're not really using them anymore and they're still in your linen closet. Okay, I'll give you that. There might be a few things in there that has some sentimental value, but in a lot of cases, we've got towels, we've got blankets, we've probably got worn out stuff, maybe cosmetics that we tried for 3 days and we hated, but we just felt bad throwing them away. There's gonna be a lot of that stuff in your linen closet. So that is why I suggest that place as the area to start. The next thing to talk about is the time frame. So, couple suggestions with this. Who in here would consider themselves to be a morning person? Oh, there's only 4 of us, okay? Afternoon, you got your most energy in the afternoon, and then what about night owls? Okay, great. So you've all self-identified when you are the most productive and motivated. You want to do your downsizing appointment with yourself during that time, okay? So I personally get up most days between 4:30 and 5. I'm not my most productive right away when I get out of bed, but 6 a.m. is probably a good time for me. Some of you might be 9 p.m.ers, right? So you've kind of identified when you have the most energy. Now I want you to pencil your downsizing appointment with yourself into your calendar just like you did this seminar today. Because all of you, when you put things on your calendar, it seems to me like you show up for them, right? For me, too, my calendar is what rules my life. If I don't put it on there, it's probably not happening, okay? And I've found over the years that I can chip away at a huge project just by putting little sections of time on my calendar over the course of a couple weeks or a month, rather than trying to go at a big project in a half-day chunk, right? So,
I'm thinking, what I do for myself is,
yeah,
because I'm trying to do some of this, I've already got a little bit of a start.
Yep.
But I have to actually visualize, I have to visualize that area. I have to visualize what it is I'm going to need to work in that area,
Sure.
you know, and then this idea of visualizing your time. What does that look like in the middle of everything else?
Sure.
You know, I have to
Yeah.
visualize.
Visualizing is huge. I taught myself how to drive stick shift after a few frustrating days by just visualizing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with that. Visualizing is great, right? So when you're picking your time frame to work with, if you haven't done any downsizing on a regular basis, I would suggest just making that appointment with yourself for 15 minutes to start. And as I mentioned before, you know, you will get better at this as you go along. Downsizing and decluttering is kind of like a muscle you have to work out. So it's the same thing as if you decided tomorrow you wanted to run a marathon by summer. You are not going to be able on Thursday to put your running shoes on and run 8 miles unless you're already, you know, in practice of that. The first day you think about running a marathon, you may just put on your shoes and walk down the hallway and that's it for the day, right? But that's still progress, right? So commit yourself to a very small time frame. So then let's just say tomorrow at 9 p.m. is your first downsizing session with yourself. You've committed to 15 minutes. I want you to put on a timer. And you must go until the timer stops. But once it stops, you can be done. Unless you feel like you're really on a roll, because 15 minutes is not that much time. If you really feel like you're on a roll, you're welcome to set the timer for another 15 minutes and see how that feels when you're done. And the reason I stress so much is picking this small time frame is, again, to combat the overwhelm, but also because work expands to fill the time that you allow it to have. So if you give yourself an hour, I bet you'll still only get about 15 minutes worth of work done, right? But if we give ourselves 15 minutes, sometimes we get 20 minutes worth of work done in that amount of time because psychologically we're like, oh, we don't have very much time, gotta really hustle, okay? So, couple of reasons for that. Hopefully it makes sense to you all why we're gonna do it that way. And again, the goal is to slowly build up your stamina and try to make that timer session maybe 30 minutes within a couple of weeks, or maybe an hour within a couple of months. Okay, so now that we know kind of our getting started plan, what do we do to make those decisions when we show up to our appointment with ourselves? I suggest putting things into piles. And you know what's probably going to be more helpful than just, you know, a little pile over here and a little pile over here. Maybe make some boxes or label some trash bags just so you don't forget what each pile is as you're going along, right? And that'll also keep it organized in case you don't want to clean up after yourself after every little 15-minute session. It'll keep things a little bit more compact. So the piles I would suggest are the keep pile, give to family pile, donate, sell, and throw away or recycle. And I'm going to give you some questions to help you decide what goes into each of those piles in a minute. But before I transition to that, I want to make a quick note about the throwaway or recycling pile, mostly the throwaway one. So, is there anybody in here who's similar to me and brings a very empty trash can down to their curb on garbage day? Yeah, mine usually has maybe one bag of trash. I'm more of a recycler than a trasher every week. Maybe two if I'm really, you know, hosting a gathering that week or something. So when you're thinking about throwing stuff away, rather than committing yourself to getting a giant dumpster for a week or something, think about making a goal for yourself, you know, an hour or so before, on the day you bring your garbage can down to the curb or the day before, going and making a goal to bring a half full or an all the way full garbage can down to your curb. Just so that, again, you slowly chip away at the things you're throwing away because you're already paying for that service, right? Why not get the max out of it that you can? Oh.
Did you say do it like an hour before the trash comes so you can't take it back out?
I really meant to say plan an hour the day before the trash day, but it didn't quite come out right, and I think that's a great strategy. Unless you're not a morning person and your trash guy comes at 6 a.m., then you might have a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, give yourself as little time as possible to rethink your decision. I think that's great. Okay, so we've kind of set up our scene so we know what piles we're using for sorting things. And now we have to figure out how to decide what goes in each pile. So I have 6 questions here that I'm going to go over. Some of them are easy. Some of them are going to take us a little bit more time to work through. But I think they are pretty useful. So the first question that you might want to ask yourself when you pick up an item out of your linen closet is it necessary or used regularly? So I often tell the story of how my in-laws, lovely people, they give each member of the family a stocking every Christmas. And usually in that stocking are very useful items like toothbrushes or a bar of chocolate or a bar of soap. And every year, times however many people in my family there are, we get that many bars of soap. I have not used bar soap as a cleaning tool since I was probably 10 years old, or whenever my mom switched from using bar soap. Nothing against it, it's just not my style. I never really liked how kids would wash their hands, like they leave the remnants of the dirt on it, and it's just, to me, it's not my style, okay? So I get 3 to 4 bars of soap every single Christmas, and it's a gift somebody gave me, so I feel like I can't give it away, but I have really no use for it, right? So I might have several years worth of bar soap stacked up in my linen closet that I'm never planning to use and I have to make a decision on. Guess what? I can easily put that in the giveaway pile because I know there are food pantries out there that can always use toiletries and other types of essentials for their clients to give away, okay? So very, very easy example, but for me, bar soap is not necessary or used regularly, so I can easily use that question to make my decision. Are there multiples of the item? Is another, I think, fairly easy one. I'm going to transition us to the kitchen for a second. If you're like me, you probably have way more than enough mugs in your cupboard than you need for everyday coffee drinking. We probably have, at any given time, 20 mugs available. My husband's the only one who drinks coffee, and we run our dishwasher, every 3 to 4 days, right? So I probably don't need 20 coffee mugs. So for coffee mugs, I happen to have a relative who's a potter, so a lot of them are very nice, some are sentimental, but others have been given as random swag gifts from a business, or they might just be the plain white ones that came with my set of dishes. So I can figure out which ones of the multiples I don't care as much about, and then think about giving away the next ones. This is a good one too, I think, for tools. I know a lot of people have, multiple hammers or multiple drill sets, and maybe all those hammers had a good use at one point, but you're not doing as much woodworking anymore. Maybe just pick your favorite, the most useful one, and find homes for the next ones. All right, third question though, I think we're gonna be here for a few minutes. Is there sentimental value to the item? So let me set the scene a little bit here for you. I've already told you that I am a pretty sentimental person. I'm about to embarrass myself a little bit here, but I promise there's a point. So about 9 or 10 years ago, I owned a home on the west side of Madison, and it was my second home, about twice the size of my first home, right? Ranch plan home with 3 bedrooms. I had a main level living room and a lower level kind of hangout family room space. And when my husband and I moved into that house, we didn't have any kids. If you're doing the math from earlier, I adopted my kids, so that's why I have adult children. And this is only 10 years ago story, okay? So we didn't have any kids. And I was working as a full-time musician. My husband was working as a full-time firefighter in the city of Madison. And that is code for we had a lot of time on our hands. And what did we do with that time when we moved into our new house? We went to garage sales and estate sales, and we collected awesome stuff for our house that was twice as big as our old one, right? On deal and discount. It was great. So fast forward about 5 years, my husband comes to me one day and he says, you know what, wife, I think I want to be a farmer. And I said, I don't. And he was like, well, I think it would be good. Let's go look for a little hobby farm. And I have the type of husband who, when he makes up his mind about something, unless there's a really good reason not to do it, we're doing that thing, and that's fine. I have no regrets. But I now live in the country, in an old farmhouse that has, less space by about 500 square feet than my former house. And it's an old farmhouse. So I have 2 levels and a leaky basement, which means I have some stuff I need to get rid of, right? One of the things that I collected during that estate sale and garage selling time was a mid-century modern turquoise couch. I think I paid about $25 for it at an estate sale. It was a pretty good deal. It wasn't perfect, one of the cushions had a stain on it, but it was great for the basement, for, sitting down and watching TV or taking a nap in the cool weather in the summer. But there was no reason for me to have that couch in my new house that only had one couch appropriate area. And my choices were either I get rid of this couch, or I'm going to be putting it in a building on my property, and the cats are going to pee on it, and the mice are going to shred it, and that doesn't really seem like the most honoring thing for this couch that I really loved so much because of how cool of a find it was. So I realized, okay, Jess, I think you're getting rid of the couch. I put it on Craigslist. I'm sure some of you have heard of that site for selling things. It's not that popular anymore, but it was a great site to use back then. And I had some antique dealers come and pay me $375 for the couch, right? So you're thinking, okay, Jess made a $350 profit. She's got to be feeling good. Well, I like making a profit, but when the couch walked out of my house with those antique dealers, I locked the door and I cried for 1 hour over a couch, okay? Ridiculous and silly, but I tell that story to point out a couple of things. Our feelings about our stuff are not always logical, right? Doesn't make any sense why I would cry about a secondhand old couch with a stain on it, but it reminded me of so many things that were lovely, right? Second thing is, I still remember the couch, right? I still remember that time in my life where I found it and was making those memories, so I haven't forgotten. And then the third thing is that I lived to stand before you today, 10 years later, and tell the story, right? So the emotions, they will not kill us. And I know everybody in this room logically knows that, but sometimes they feel so big and so hard and feel like there's no way you're going to make it through them, right? So, for those items that there is sentimental value to, the biggest tip that I have is probably not rocket science, but I would suggest you take a picture of those items if you feel like you need to let them go, okay? Because we don't necessarily need the thing itself. We just are often worried about forgetting the memory associated with it, right? As long as we have a visual representation of the item, we're still going to be able to recall that memory when we want to, okay? So, especially in the case of something like a couch, a little photograph takes up a whole heck of a lot less space than the couch itself, right? So think about all those sentimental things that you have in your home and the space that they're taking up and how much you'll be able to reduce the amount of stuff by just taking a photograph. And you don't even have to print it out. You could keep it digitally if you really want to, All right. But when we're thinking about sentimental stuff, I also want to remind you that whatever you cannot face and deal with at the time you're decluttering, eventually somebody else may have to deal with it for you. Okay? So imagine if you're having a difficult time making decisions about that item, how difficult it's going to be for another person who doesn't have all the information that you have about it to make a decision where they feel like they're honoring you as the former owner, right? So, as tempting as it may be to just think, okay, well, I'm just not going to deal with this, and then, you know, my kids or my grandkids or my nieces and nephews, they can take care of it when I'm gone. They're not going to have any easier time making those decisions, right? And so often what happens when you task people with making those decisions is they just box it all up and put it in their basement. Is there anybody in here who has older family members' stuff just boxed up in their basement because they couldn't make the decisions either, okay? So those of you who feel those emotions, don't do that to somebody else if you can help it, right? So let's just say, okay, you've got quite a few things that there is no logical reason to keep, but emotionally you can't give them up. That's okay, right? There's nobody in here saying decluttering means you have to get rid of everything you own. You can keep some stuff, that's fine. Whatever the stuff is you decide to keep, cool, go ahead and keep it. But maybe let's make some notes, right? Or maybe we're gonna keep that sentimental stuff all together in a couple of totes, and we're gonna put a little note on top of it that says, hello, future family member who's dealing with this stuff. I really cared about all this stuff, but it probably doesn't mean anything to anybody else. So you're welcome to just pick up this whole tote and donate it, or pick up this whole tote and throw it in the trash once I'm no longer here. You have my permission. I think permission is really important in those sorts of things, okay? So, let's transition a little bit to some particular sentimental items like photographs, right? I just told you to take more photographs, but some of you may be thinking, really, Jess, I need you to tell me what to do with my photographs. So I have a couple of tips that hopefully you'll find helpful. The first one is, when you're going through your photographs, if you do want to get rid of the space that they're taking up, you can send them off to companies that can digitize them and then dispose of them for you. Then obviously you'll just have a file drive or a little thumb drive or something to be able to access those with, or you can put them in maybe a smaller digital scrapbook. But I just warn you that technology changes from time to time. So if you're really looking for those photographs to live on forever and ever and ever, just be cautious with the digitizing piece, okay? So maybe you're just not comfortable with the digital, but you do know that you need to reduce your selection, okay? So think about this. First of all, if you go through the photo and there are no people in it, that could be one that you consider giving away. A silly little example that I give, let's just say you went on a trip to Washington, D.C. in 1993 and you took a really cool picture of the Washington Monument. Now, I would like you to think to yourself what that picture from 1993 might look like. Do you think if you Googled the Washington Monument, you'd probably find a better picture online at this point? Yeah, right? So maybe you don't need to keep that one because it probably didn't turn out that great anyways, thinking about the technology that we had back then to take photographs. Sort of a silly example, but just trying to make it light. The other thing that you might consider is if there are people in the photograph and you don't know who they are and it's not noted anywhere on the photograph, and you also don't have anybody that you can ask who's in that photo, maybe that's also one you consider parting with. If you've lived in an area for a long time though, sometimes it can be good to reach out to a historical society and consider bringing some of those photographs to them because they might be part of, like the town or village history, and it could be interesting for that organization to have them. Lastly, when you're going through the photographs, maybe you have found a bunch of photos of your niece or your nephew or your daughter or your son. Maybe start making piles of photos that have a specific person in them and consider passing those photos along to the person in the photo. They might enjoy having some of those photos from when they were younger, okay? Otherwise, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this sentimental type of stuff when we go on to the next question. Would a family member or friend appreciate the item? So, every time I'm in a room like this, I very frequently hear, my family doesn't want any of my stuff. And I see almost half the room nodding. So you've all been there, you have all felt that feeling. And here's why I think giving stuff to family members is so important to most people. We have good stuff, right? We might not need that stuff anymore, but it is good and useful stuff. And none of us want to fill up a landfill with something perfectly useful, right? We want people to use and appreciate the things that we don't need anymore. So that's what makes it so hard to just think about doing a lot of this decluttering stuff, is how do we honor the item and let it continue living even though it doesn't need to live in our lives anymore? So you can consider giving it to a family member or a friend, but you may find that you're not going to be able to do that with as much stuff as you think you are. So you might need to extend your family and friend definition a little bit. Here's a couple of suggestions on how to do that. The first thing, we'll just stick with family and friends first. The decluttering party. That is where you have done some of this decluttering stuff. You've identified some of the things that you want to put in your giveaway pile, and you decide to invite a few select family and friends over, and you tell them, I will provide the cheese, crackers, and wine and homemade cookies, and your job is to bring a reusable shopping bag and leave from my house with at least 3 things that belong to me that you might like. Okay? First of all, this is really fun. And I bet people will be excited about it because one man's trash is another man's treasure, and it's so true. Something you might think is absolutely ridiculous, somebody else might be really excited about. And then my favorite perk, you have now cursed that item with a memory. And in 20 years, that person who took it home is not going to know how to get rid of it. Right? Just kidding. So you can, I think, get rid of a lot of stuff that way. There's also the idea of the free crap sale, not the most professional or eloquent name, but it's akin to a garage sale, only everything there is free. I've been teaching people about this for, 2.5 years, and about 6 months ago, I finally heard about a real life example that it works, okay? My dad told me that he went to a garage sale that was just for 2 hours, from 12 to 2, and everything was free, and he said the street was lined with cars, and the place was almost empty by 1 p.m. So, people love free stuff. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the hoarders aren't going to show up and that your stuff may not end up in a hoarder's house where it's not going to get used. But I would say probably the majority of people are actually going to be excited about the stuff that they pick up. And you may find yourself connecting with maybe a family that, is recovering from homelessness and needs to furnish a whole entire house with a new set of dishes or, some extra mugs, right? So your stuff can really be a blessing to people who are in need as well. There are lots of places on the internet where you can give away things like the Nextdoor app. Facebook Marketplace has Facebook has a lot of groups that are just like free within your neighborhood. if you put stuff on the curb, it always disappears, right? So you will be able to find people who can benefit from and use your things. It just might be a little going outside of your normal thought process to find those people. Yes,
I had a bunch of teacups
okay.
and saucers, and my family lives far away. So I sent it to my 3 granddaughters.
Oh, nice.
It was so much fun. I wanted that one. No, I wanted that one. These are the ones I want.
Yeah, and those are
I
gonna
didn't think
be
they'd
so
go over
special
that
to
good.
them. Yeah, that's really, really awesome.
And then my daughter-in-law said, why didn't you ask them, give them to me first?
Oh.
And then my son says, I'm the executor, I get to decide what to do with them.
See, and now
I
you've
said,
got
"Not
the
where I'm
whole,
still alive."
now you've got the whole family
Yes,
involved and
yes.
invested and excited. That's really great too. So create some jealousy. Like that. Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, does it have significant financial value? And I love this one because I already gave you an example of how I was able to turn $25 into $375. So it can be done. There are lots of places that you can sell things. There are consignment shops. There are antique dealers you can get connected with. There are online sites like Facebook Marketplace, eBay, specialty sites of all different kinds. This is the first spot where I will allude to on your survey. There's some further resources. One of the resources you can ask for is my vendor list. I do have a lot of different types of vendors you might use for downsizing, and some of the things on there are places to give things away or sell things to. And I'm always looking for reasons to research more, right? So I recently had somebody ask, well, what do I do with old firearms, right? So then I was able to find a resource for that. What do I do with coins or silver? And then I'm able to add a resource for that too. So if you ask for the vendor list and there's not a specific resource on there that you're looking for, just let me know because I'm happy to go out and find you some options. Okay. So anyways, back to significant financial value. So you're going to have stuff that is worth money. But what I need you to think about is, do you have the expertise to get the money for that item?
Right.
Okay? So again, another story from my garage sailing, estate sailing days. I picked up this really cool set of 20 books, I think it was, called the Old West series. And these are books like this. They're just small, but made out of this leathery sort of stuff. The covers were cushy. They were really, really neat on topics like, the cowboys and the natives and all that sort of stuff. And I brought these home and I never read them. It was just too much, right? I displayed them for a little bit, but then when I moved to my farmhouse and realized how heavy they were, they kind of stayed packed up for a really long time. And I had done some research over time to see that, as a set, these books could be worth maybe $300, $500, but I don't know book people, right? So yeah, I could probably go online and maybe find somebody to buy them, but they're so heavy it'll probably cost $100 to ship them. And I just decided that, I was gonna put that to the side and not think about it because I don't really know how to sell them. So it continued to be in the back of my mind, never did anything about it. They sat in a shed. And then I met a Wild West reenactor one time. And I said, you know what, I have some books that I think you might like. And I told him about them and he was like, oh, all of us in our community, we love those books. And there's so many people who would love to get their hands on them and they don't have a whole set, or they just have a couple here and there. And so I just decided, you know what, this is the right place for that item to go. I maybe could have made $200-300 on it if I would have taken some more time with it, but to me it just felt better to just move it on and not worry about what I could have gotten, because clearly I wasn't putting in the work to actually get the money out of it, right? So you can weigh the options, whether it's worth your time to go ahead and actually make the money or not. The last question that I have, will this fit into a smaller space? And this is important for those of you who might be considering actually downsizing and moving to a different home. As a realtor, I help people all the time find smaller homes, and it's always interesting and unique to have to redirect people when they step foot into a new home they might be touring, and they right away start analyzing the size of the living room and how this sectional and these 3 armchairs and these 4 stereo speakers aren't going to fit in this space. I can't buy this home. But the home works, right? They're just not seeing past the size of the things that they have now. So there may be things that are perfectly good that you have that you need to find a new home for and buy a smaller set. Okay? All right, I'm going to keep rolling. We could probably spend another 3 hours on this topic, but I'm going to keep rolling for interest of time. We have only about 15 minutes left. So, decluttering, if you heard all of what I just said in the last 25 minutes and you're like, okay, no, 15 minutes or not, I can't do this. There are professionals who can help you, okay? So we have several larger companies in the area. Wellrive, they used to be Moving Forward. Probably a lot of you have heard of them. They do a wonderful job. Segways is also great. I haven't spent as much time working with Caring Transitions, but these are all folks who will meet with you and hear about what you're struggling with as far as decluttering and downsizing. They'll help you decide if you should try to sell things, if you should donate them, if you should throw them away, how hands-on you want to be with the process, etc. And you can turn it over to them, right? There is, of course, a cost to this. They usually charge hourly, and it's not going to be $15 an hour. It's going to be a bit higher than that. But I want you to think about it this way. If you are going to be the type that's going to approach this process thinking, I can't make that decision today. Oh, nope, can't make that decision today. And you're going to continue to do that for the next 3 to 5 years, while this decision you're supposed to make is still weighing heavily on your mind for 3 to 5 years, it's one of those time is money type of things, right? If you can hire somebody to take a month to do the process that's going to take you 5 years, that can be absolutely worth every penny if you can afford to do it. So I would encourage you to seek help from the pros if you need. So relationship management is a fun topic. For those of you who have significant others in the room, would you say you're both on exactly the same page with this process? No? Okay. Is there anybody in the room who has a significant other who should be participating?
Who should be here today?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have a couple of tips I want to pass along, and I do want to just mention that we're people, and this is not magic. Hopefully some of it will help you get on the same page, but I can't promise that, it's going to turn your resistant significant other into somebody who's like really excited about this, but hopefully it will help a little bit. So if your significant other does not want to declutter, what are some things that you can do? I would say number 1, start with having an open and honest conversation about your reason for wanting to downsize and declutter. We talked earlier about how some of you have things from your family members that never got dealt with, right? So maybe your reason for wanting to do this is that you don't want to be that person when you come to that point in your life. Or maybe your stuff is just piling up and it's making you feel stressed every day and you just want to reduce your stress level. Whatever the reason is, just make sure you share that, because sometimes it's not that easy to get motivated to do something if you don't feel like there's a good enough reason. Okay? Start with your own stuff, right? I bet there's a lot of us who could spend 2 years on our own stuff before we have to worry about telling anybody else to do their job, right? Make what progress you can, even if it doesn't involve the other person. Don't pressure or nag them to declutter. Pretty sure everybody in this room is the type where if somebody nags you or pressures you, it actually makes you want to do the opposite even more, right? Makes us dig in our heels. You could ask where they are open to decluttering. You know how we talked about the linen closet earlier. Maybe the significant other is stressed because they don't, they can only think about decluttering this one area, and that's the hardest area for them. But maybe there's another spot that doesn't feel as emotional and as hard. So you could work through that a little bit. give them a say in decluttering decisions. You never want to just make those decisions for them, because sometimes we know what's important to our significant other, but we don't always know how significant something might be to another person. My favorite one, this is not just for significant others, I should have probably mentioned this in the questions to ask section. The maybe box. The maybe box is a super helpful tool. This is if you run into one of those items where you're like, ooh, I haven't used it in a while, but I feel like as soon as I get rid of it, I'm gonna need it again, right? So I always tell people that I was once the owner of a salad spinner. I now am the owner of a salad spinner again, okay? So sometimes we have that stuff that, in a certain phase of our life we don't use, okay? It's okay to get rid of that stuff and to maybe have to repurchase it again, but maybe set yourself a dollar threshold. A salad spinner probably costs $5 at Goodwill, right? So if you get rid of it and then in a year you need another one, it's probably not going to break the bank to go find another $5 salad spinner. But if it's $100, maybe that's something you want to consider more closely and use the maybe box. So the maybe box is just what it sounds like. I maybe use this item. It's going to go in this box with all the other I maybe use this item things. And once the box is filled, I'm going to close it up and get my Sharpie out and write a date on it. Let's say you give yourself 3 months or 6 months. Whatever time frame you put on there, if in that time frame you find yourself going to that box and needing to get the item out again to use it, okay, you can keep that one. It is something that you are using from time to time. But if you don't use something, keep it in the box, keep it sealed, and when that 6-month date hits, either load it up and take it to whatever your favorite donation place is or throw it right in the trash. Do not open the box again or you'll have to remake all those decisions one more time. Okay? So that's the deal with the maybe box. Yes.
I just had that this morning about giving them a say in decluttering decisions, because I was cleaning out the bathroom sink in his bathroom.
Sure.
He said, there's nothing under there that needs to be thrown away. Well, I told him I already threw a couple of things away, but then I brought this empty plastic, I think for his toothbrush. I said, do you wanna keep this empty container? He says, yes. I said, okay, we'll keep it, but I don't know why you wanna keep it.
Sure.
So he doesn't wanna throw much out either. We have a very cluttered house.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll happen, and it is the thing, like I said, that sometimes you can't do anything and they're gonna be ready when they're ready. But it is, you never know. Maybe the next time you'll come to him with an item, you'll be like, hey, I noticed that this doesn't seem like we're using it much. And he might be like, oh, okay, go ahead and get rid of that, right? So keep
Another
trying.
thing that I learned, I used to save flyers, sale flyers.
Sure.
That would come in from different stores and stuff, or little postcards that would come in about some event or something that maybe I'll attend.
Mm-hmm.
I used to save all that stuff thinking, well, maybe I will.
Mm-hmm.
I learned from a friend of mine though, and she's so right. She says, you'll get that again.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some of those flyers there only last for a week or two.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, you get a new one
Sure.
that's updated, you don't need the old one. So maybe, that's the other thing, there's a time period, you can always
Yep.
throw it out,
Mhm.
don't worry about
Very, very true.
whether you get it again.
Yep. That's a
Yeah.
great point. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so 3 more on this. Make it more fun with some friendly competition. Maybe you pick a day and, when you're a little further than 15 minutes into your time frame practice of decluttering, where whoever fills the most trash bags at the end of the day is the one who doesn't have to do the dishes for the night, or whatever will motivate you to compete with one another. Offer to help them declutter is a good one, and I think again this one goes for working on your decluttering yourself, but also working with your significant other. If you're not feeling great about making these decisions, bring in another family member who can help. Like I talked about being emotional and sentimental. My husband will easily come in and be like, yeah, I think you're being silly, so just throw it away, right? Sometimes we just need that person to validate that, like, okay, the world's not gonna end if I do get rid of this item. And then a little bit of encouragement goes a long way. Encourage each other when you declutter. And pat yourselves on the back. Some of you may have other family members, not significant others, who want to give you advice and get involved in the process. And, you know, I think all of you in this room seem to me like able-bodied folks whose brains are working just fine and who still have autonomy and control over your lives, right? So if your family members want to get involved in some way, take the involvement that you find useful and valuable and ask them to lay off for the rest, or put them to work, right? You might need help with those decisions, or you might need some emotional support, or you might just need manpower, right? So those kids of yours who are telling you it's time for you to move to a different house, or it's time for you to do this, well, if they want it to happen so bad, then they better come over and help, right? Okay, so I'm going to try to blaze through the rest in 5 minutes. If I run slightly over and you have to go, feel free to just leave when you have to. Otherwise, you know, I'll just finish up until the room is empty. It won't take me that much longer. I've been doing pretty good with time. So if you are thinking about moving, where do you start with that process? How many homeowners do we have in the room? Okay, a majority of people. So if you do own a home, I would recommend consulting with a realtor. And this is not a sales pitch for you to call me, right? If you have a realtor in your back pocket who you already know and trust, feel free to call that person. If you don't, you can feel free to reach out to me anytime as a resource, but that's not what this is about, right? I want you to reach out to a realtor because that realtor can help you establish a budget. How much is your current home worth? How much is going to be left after you sell it and you've paid realtor fees and title fees and paid off your remaining mortgage and taken care of your property taxes? What is that nest egg going to look like, right? And then you can also evaluate for your next living situation, do you want to buy again or do you want to rent? I know it can be really hard for those of us who have been lifetime homeowners to feel like selling a house and renting is a reasonable option. But if renting meets your needs, you do not have to feel guilty about using your money to rent. If you still feel like you want to be a homeowner and you want the responsibilities that come with that, you know, feel free to move to a home that feels better for you. But they can help you evaluate what might be a good option for you. If you've got a financial advisor, that person can also help evaluate renting versus buying. But the realtor can help you assess your housing needs. If you're buying another house, what type of house might suit you. They can also go over financing options. How are you going to purchase the house? Are you going to use equity from the home you currently own? Do we need to talk to a lender? Do you want to stay in your home, but you're finding that the cost of living is putting you in a pinch, whether that be with property taxes or whether that be with just regular expenses? Because there are ways that you can use the equity in your home to help you stay in your home as well with things like reverse mortgages. I know that's a topic that makes people's alarm bells go up. They are a legitimate resource, but you do need to obviously understand what that entails. And I'm not a lender, but I can connect you with people who know about that, right? So there's a lot of different things to think about. Now, quick poll. Who has lived in their home that they own for 10 years or more? 20? 30? 35? 40? 45? 50? Okay. Impressive. Very impressive. I love to see that. I'm so glad there's so many who have been in the same home for so long. But with that comes some challenges, right, when you're thinking about selling. Your house might be in perfectly good condition. You might love the style of it, but the style of it might be 1980, right? And that's totally fine if it's working for you, but what should you do to your home in order to present it for sale? So I have a couple of pictures up here. And the things that I'm kind of demonstrating with these two pictures, the one on the left is supposed to be a more outdated style home. The one on the right is supposed to be a little bit more modern, but they're not the most modern of homes, either one of them, right? So I am sort of the time frame. If it isn't broke, don't fix it, just price accordingly when you sell. But there will be some small things that you can do that will really make a difference. For example, this home on the left, I don't know if your eye is drawn to anything in particular, but my eye is drawn right here. Forest green is not an in paint color right now. I'm sorry to those of you who might have forest green in your home. That's totally fine if you're enjoying it. But this house had like a 12-foot ceiling, right? Imagine being a buyer and walking into a home where forest green is not trendy and you're like, how am I gonna paint a 12-foot ceiling? Or get high enough to get that as a regular person. So I tried to convince the sellers to paint this. The funny thing about it was the seller was a professional painter. He wouldn't do it, okay? So this is just one of those things as an example where somebody walks in and they open the door and they're like, yeet, and then they turn around, right? We might all have a few of those things in our house. So quick things that not quick, but easier things that you can do that will give you a lot of bang for your buck would be things like maybe updating some paint colors. Light colors and neutral colors are what is in these days. You could consider doing things like updating light fixtures. We do have some gold coming back, but it's a lot of brushed nickel and black. That is kind of the trend these days, and obviously, stylings are different with different eras. Removing wallpaper is another big one that can go a long way. What do you do with flooring, though, right? I think flooring is one of those things that you have to consider carefully because each person's preference is different. If you have had 25 cats for 3 years, we're probably going to want to have you do something about your flooring because it probably doesn't smell that good. But if it's just maybe a little bit dirty or has some wear patterns, you might want to consider offering a flooring credit to the next buyer rather than choosing the flooring just to have them, tear it out 2 weeks after they move in and you just wasted that money, okay? So again, with this one, find your favorite real estate agent. I wouldn't say, and get them to walk through and give you some advice. In most cases, I wouldn't say to spend a ton of money for these types of things unless you're planning to stay a while and enjoy the updates. Don't spend $80,000 on a kitchen remodel and move in a month because you will only get 50 to 60% of what you put in.